Odd Eyes, one of the three archetypes that was used, mismashed and ham-fisted together by the Arc V protagonist Yu Sakaki across the 4th spin-off's run. While some of the support was as terrible as the show ended up becoming, Odd Eyes as a whole came away with a very solid deck that sits comfortably at the edge of Rogue tier even after the recent ban list. Having said that, said ban list has neutered the deck quite a bit, with Astrograph obviously being a former huge playmaker for the deck, and Supreme King Starving Venom being one of the deck's most consistent ways of getting the OTK. While the Astrograph hit was a guarantee, I do kind of wish that Starving Venom wasn't hit due to its role in this deck, but given how it works with other decks, I can see why they did it. And one thing I want to make perfectly clear before we get right into this video is that this is neither Pendulum Magicians nor Odd Eyes Magicians. While both of those decks do have a lot of synergy with this pure build, this dossier is focused on the quote-unquote pure version of Odd Eyes. Again, it's just something I want to make clear before we get into it. So as always, we're going to break this deck down and discuss all the aspects that go into it as we discuss the contents of the deck. That includes how the deck works, where its strengths and weaknesses lie, as well as discussing deck building aspects such as tech choices that can go into the deck. And then, at the end of the video, we will go over some replays showing off the deck as well as discussing how it can work and function in certain situations. And so let's begin by discussing a card that did not appear in the anime nor the manga, yet ended up being one of Odd Eyes' best cards as it synergizes perfectly with its playstyle. That being Odd Eyes Arc Pendulum Dragon. A normal level 7 with 2700 attack, its pendulum effect is pretty simple. Once per turn, if an Odd Eyes card is destroyed, special summon any Odd Eyes monster from your hand, deck or graveyard. This is played at 3 for a number of reasons. First and foremost being that it can summon Pendulum level 7s to be used as material for Electromite and rank 7s. It pushes the ceiling of the deck right up when you draw into it, and not only that, you can get it out of the scales with Meteor Burst later on if you've got room or need to go into another rank 7, or you can use its 8 scale for a Pendulum summon. Therefore, you'll be running 3 of these because it's just not an Odd Eyes deck without it. Next is a card whose usefulness has been heavily reduced by the banning of Supreme King Starving Venom, that being Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon. Despite this, there's still a lot to like about this card, as it's not only a searcher, but an inbuilt monster reborn which can result in a comeback. With a scale of 12, which is really good, its pendulum effect prevents non-dragons from being pendulum summoned, but in exchange, you can revive a dragon fusion, synchro or Xyz from the grave by destroying this card, potentially bringing back any of the rather strong Odd Eyes extra deck monsters. And while the vast majority of its monster effect has been rendered useless since we won't touch it, you can still discard it and pay 500 life points to search a level 8 or lower Pendulum Dragon, which is also really good for this deck. One of the major strengths of this deck is being able to get the right cards for their combos no matter their opening hand. Revolution Dragon being able to search out basically the entire monster lineup is extremely useful, and the revival effect has come in clutch in a number of occasions. Therefore I run 3, as despite the loss of Starving Venom, I feel that this card still has a ton of uses. Odd Eyes Lancer Dragon is unique in this deck as it is the only non-pendulum that I play. While it is definitely not a staple of the deck, from the playtesting I've done, having him at 1 in the deck has been more than useful on a number of different occasions. Here's why. While its summon effect from the hand isn't that good, you'll often be summoning it off of Arc Pendulum Dragon if you don't need to summon material for summons, and the rest of its effects is pretty good. It has a steamroll effect when attacking, and if any Odd Eyes card would be destroyed, you can destroy any other Odd Eyes card in your hand, monster or pendulum zones instead. Along with being a 3k beater, it has a good place in the deck in my opinion. I run just the 1, as given its usefulness especially for ending games with the steamroll effect, I believe it deserves a spot, despite not having a huge amount of synergy with the rest of the deck. Next on the list is one of the fusion enablers presented within the deck, that being Performer Power Odd Eyes Dissolver. While being level 8 is unfortunate, it gives you access to cards such as the OG Starving Venom and Performer Power Gatling Ghoul, both of which help immensely when pushing for an OTK. With a useful scale of 4, Its effect lets you fusion once per turn using monsters in your hand or field as material. Conversely, if it's in hand when a pendulum you control battles, you can summon it and protect that monster from being destroyed by that battle. Then, if it survives till your turn, you can use it along with monsters either on the field or in the pendulum zones for a fusion summon. Again, it being level 8 is awkward, and it cannot be summoned by Arc Pendulum's effect, meaning you won't have it on field unless you summon it via its own effect. However, I run it at 2 because of how powerful the fusions you can summon are, and you can also summon Vortex Dragon with this monster. I'll go into why they're all so good later, but they are the reason you should run this card at 2. Next is the monster that started it all, Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. Surprisingly, despite having a decent pendulum effect and an okay monster effect, the main reason you're running this guy is not only for the searchability, but also the fact that it is material for basically the entire extra deck. Nevertheless, the pendulum effect can reduce battle damage to 0 and will come in clutch in certain situations. Beyond that, searching in the end phase is somewhat limited, but there are still a few targets. Also, dealing double battle damage when attacking has ended a few games for me, which has been really good. I run 2 of this card, if only because it can be used to summon out basically the entire extra deck, which is where this deck really shines. Odd Eyes Phantom Dragon serves a similar function to the original Pendulum Dragon, but is also one of your key players in going for a quick OTK if you don't have to play through negations. Its pendulum effect once per turn gives a monster you control 1200 extra attack in battle if you have an Odd Eyes card, such as Arc Pendulum, in the other Pendulum zone. Additionally, if this Pendulum summon card afflicts damage by battle, you can burn the opponent for 1200 times the number of Odd Eyes cards in your Pendulum zones, potentially stacking on another 2400 damage. I run this card at 3 because of the sheer damage output it can produce, along with its searchability and its ability to be extra deck food. As it stands, there really are no downsides to this card, so yeah, run 3. Next is Astrograph's younger brother that no one cared about before the ban list, Chronograph Sorcerer. While this card is nowhere near as good as its older bro, it still holds a good place in the deck and can give Odd Eyes access to another negation on the first turn. Its pendulum effect lets you destroy itself to either summon or place its base form, Time Gazer Magician, in the pendulum zone or summon it. Also, if a card you control is destroyed, you can summon it, then summon another monster from your hand. It also has the Zark shenanigans like Astrograph, but that's not relevant here. Summoning Time Gazer, which you also run at 1 in this deck, can lead to Electromite being summoned before your pendulum summon most jewels, which is ideal. Beyond that, getting 2 of these out leads to Naruto, which provides spell trap negation, and it being an 8 scale has come in use plenty of times. I run 3, but given the close proximity of this video to the ban list and me having to rewrite this video during that time, this may be something to play around with. Next is the last monster that you run multiple copies of in the deck, that being Odd Eyes Persona Dragon, although it definitely doesn't look like anything that this boy would summon. Its pendulum effect lets you summon it during the end phase if your opponent targeted an Odd Eyes you control with a card or effect this turn, and if you do, you can put an Odd Eyes Pendulum monster from your extra deck into your Pendulum zone. Additionally, you can negate the effects of an extra deck monster once during either player's turn till the end of that turn if this card is on the field. Honestly, I've used the Pendulum effect maybe once, so aside from being a really nice 1 scale from the deck, its monster effect allows for some good disruption on your opponent's turn, while also serving as food for Electromite and the fusions. I run 2, as it is extremely searchable, but this one is definitely up to player preference. Supreme King Dragon Darkworm, despite being run at 1, is one of the major playstarters of the deck. Dumped in the grave by Dragon Shrine most jewels, its monster effect leads to Electromite if you get it off. While its pendulum effect is as irrelevant as I've never used it once, its monster effect lets you summon it from the grave if you control no monsters. Additionally, if summoned, you can search a Supreme King Gate from your deck, which is why you also want to run 1 copy of Supreme King Gate 0. Along with the 2 tuners which we will touch on next, as well as Time Gazer, Darkworm is one of the only normal summonable monsters in the deck, making it perfect food for Electromite. Additionally, searching your 1-off gate gives you a 0 scale, as well as a potential level 7 for some extra deck shenanigans. Run the 1, as you don't need more than 1 in the deck. The final 2 monsters in the deck are the 2 1-off tuners, that being Noble Dragon Magician and Performer Power Odd Eyes Synchron. Both give access to level 7 synchros, Noble Dragon by lowering an Odd Eyes level you control by 3 and summoning itself, and Synchron by usually using Persona Dragon from the Pendulum Zone, and both monsters' pendulum effects are mostly irrelevant for this video. I also used Noble Dragon to go into Supreme King Clearwing a couple of times as a panic button, which I'll explain later. While you often won't be using either of these monsters at all, having them in the deck gives you some flexibility and versatility to your plays, and I found myself often falling back on them when I needed to. Running one of each served me well, so I would recommend that. And that brings us to the spells of the deck, of which nearly all of them search out your playmakers, making this the shortest spell trap section of any deck dossier so far. The first of these spells is Duelist Alliance. With any card in a Pendulum Zone, you can search any monster, spell or trap that has the word Pendulum in its name. This one is pretty simple. It will usually either search out Arc Pendulum or the OG Odd Eyes, with the sole purpose of getting your play started. I did run 3 of these to begin with, but I found it to be quite useful and less bricky at 2. Worth playing around with. You then have a way to dump Darkworm into the grave in the form of Dragon Shrine. There's literally nothing more to say about this one, other than you should run 3 as you want to see it every time you don't draw Darkworm itself. So yeah, run 3. And then, along with 2 copies of Summoner's Art as another way to get Arc Pendulum into your hand, running 3 Spiral Flame Strike helps the deck immensely. Not only is it yet another searcher, but if you control an Odd Eyes card, you can target and destroy any 1 card on the field. Usually you'll use this card to destroy a face down on your opponent's field to clear the way for your plays, but in the case of a bricky hand, it can act as a searcher, and if you have no other way to trigger Arc Pendulum, you can use the destruction effect on your own Odd Eyes card to get that summon off. If that wasn't enough, you can also activate multiple per turn, so run 3 as this is never a dead card. Then you have the field spell in Sky Iris, which is good protection against disruption. Not only does it stop the cards in your Pendulum Zones from being targeted if they fall into the 3 archetypes listed, but you can also destroy any other card you control to search an Odd Eyes card, which can also yet again trigger Arc Pendulum. While the protection effect hasn't been too relevant given the current meta and whatnot, the destruction effect is good for Arc Pendulum as you want to use that effect as much as humanly possible, and it is your primary way outside of Electromite to trigger it. Therefore I run 3 along with 2 Terraforming to search it out. The last spell is one that is definitely down to player preference, that being Odd Eyes Fusion. It has the standard fusion lines, but also, if your opponent controls 2 or more monsters while you control none, you can use Odd Eyes in your extra deck as materials, and you can only activate 1 a turn. While this card was better when Supreme King Starving Venom was legal, it can still be very useful to call out Vortex Dragon in a pinch in order to try and salvage the game. I only run it at 1 however, as you rarely want to see it and Dissolver can summon a larger pool of fusions. Still, I think it is worth running the 1 of. And that wraps it up for the main deck, so let's move on to the extra deck, where we'll start things off with the monster I've mentioned already, Performer Power Gatling Ghoul. Summoned with any Performer Power and any level 5 or higher monster, this is the card you use when you can't quite go for the OTK by attacking. If fusion summoned, you can inflict 200 damage for each card on the field, and then, if summoned using a Pendulum, which will happen, you can destroy any monster your opponent controls without targeting, and then inflict damage equal to that monster's original attack, although this can only be used once per turn. Run at 1, what this card does is give the deck the push to be able to power through and get the OTK. You'll summon it using Dissolver, so you never have to worry about not getting the pop effect off, and being a 2900 beater on top of the burn effects is great as well. So yeah, run 1. Summoned in the same fashion or by Odd Eyes Fusion, is the OG Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Gaining attack equal to one special summoned monster your opponent controls when summoned, you can also, once per turn, copy the effect of one level 5 or higher monster your opponent controls until the end of that turn. And then, if that wasn't enough, if this fusion summoned card is destroyed, you can destroy all special summoned monsters your opponent controls. While I rarely summon this, on the times when I did go for it, it ended up winning me games even without the board wipe effect. However, since extra deck space is really tight, I run only the one despite its usefulness. Next is arguably the best card in the Odd Eyes archetype, and that is Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. While you can fusion this like the previous cards, you'll usually summon this off Absolute Dragon, a process for which I will explain in a second. For Vortex Dragon though, being able to bounce one attack position monster your opponent controls on special summon is really useful, as it can trigger when revived from the grave, and then being able to negate spells, traps and monster effects by simply shuffling a face up Pendulum from the extra deck into the deck is extremely useful for turn 1 plays, and the cost actually helps the deck's recursion. Like I said, you will usually be summoning this off of Absolute's effect, but I run this at 2, not only because of how useful it is, but because it is possible to summon both and have 2 negations on field, which is extremely useful. While I've only ever needed to summon both a couple of times, I'm glad that I had the second one there to do so. Moving on to the Synchros, Clearwing Synchro Dragon is one that I've summoned rarely, but has served decently for the late game. Additionally, I run one copy of Black Rose Dragon as a panic button in case I need to clear the field, but it's a button you usually don't want to press and I've only done once. Having said that, that did lead me to winning the duel, so take from that what you will. However, there are 2 Synchros that you will be summoning more often and have greater usage in the deck. The first of which is Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. I'm surprised how often I didn't need to go into this card, but its usefulness just cannot be denied. Special summoning a monster from your Pendulum zone when special summoned, you'll often be doing this to go into an Xyz play using what will often be a level 7 like Arc Pendulum, as this card can't attack the turn you activate this effect. Also, monsters your opponent possesses can't activate their effects during the battle phase, which stops cards like Battle Fader from activating. So yeah, running one is definitely worth it. The last Synchro is one I've already mentioned, Supreme King Dragon Clearwing. Summoned with Noble Dragon and Persona Dragon, if Synchro summoned, Regekis your opponent's board, cause why the fuck not? Then, if this card battles, you can destroy that monster it battles before damage calculation and inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack. There's also some Darkworm stuff, but While the effects do contradict each other a little, both are extremely useful, especially when going second. You won't ever need to summon more than one of these though, so running the one as it is will be enough. Moving on to the Xyz that I run, since we run level 7s, your boy is back, so say hello once again to Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon so that protection and burn damage can come back into your life. You also have Big Eye to steal an opponent's monster, and that leads us to one of your negation options, Naruto the Moral Leader. Summoned with 2 chronographs, its effect is simple and negates a spell or trap during either player's turn by detaching 1 Xyz material. Ideally, you'll be summoning this alongside Vortex Dragon turn 1 in order to have the maximum number of negations available you can come your opponent's turn. Running one is perfect, as it's nearly impossible to summon more than one in a game. Then comes the final Xyz, and arguably the most important one, Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. Summoned off of any 2 level 7s, which is stupid easy. Ignoring the first effect, since I've never used it at all, what you will be using this card for is material with Electromite to summon a Link 3, and in doing so, it can summon any Odd Eyes from your extra deck. However, just bear in mind that if the monster is destroyed, you aren't getting it back. But yeah, run one. And so that brings us to the links of the deck. Here I play 1 Decode Talker as my Link 3, but having said that, you can also use Zephyr Metaltron. I just prefer Decode, call me old fashioned. So along with one of either of these lads, you'll also be wanting to run 2 copies of Heavy Metal Foes Electromite. do I really need to say much about this guy? He sets up your extra deck, he can trigger your Arc Pendulum, he nets you a draw by doing so, and he can combo with Absolute Dragon to summon a Link 3 and Vortex Dragon. Run 2, because although you won't usually summon the second one, he's always useful. And so that brings us to the second to last section of the video, tech choices, and since this video is pretty long already, I'm assuming, let's jump straight in with Odd Eye's Phantasma Dragon. Discarding to add a Dragon Pendulum back to hand is useful in Master Rule 4, and its monster effect is extremely useful late game if you're low on resources. The Zero Scale is great too. Mist Valley Apex Avian is an older tech, but the bounce effect and being level 7 provides some good synergy. Also, Odd Eye's Mirage Dragon could be some decent protection / stalling, and the utility for the Pendulum Scale can come in handy in times. However, the synergy with the Magician archetype cannot be ignored. If you wish to splash some in, the two that I recommend are Wisdom Eye and Purple Poison, as it can provide some popping and material for rank 4s like Tornado Dragon. Not something I would personally do when going for a pure Odd Eyes build, but it is worth mentioning. Beyond that, Odd Eye's Venom Dragon is difficult to summon, but doing so basically guarantees a win, and did so every time I summoned him during early testing when I was running him. Also, further synchros such as Scarlet Red Dragon and Black Rose Moonlight are good for wiping and clearing boards, as well as being decent beaters when pushing for the OTK. Moving on to the spells that you could tech in, Return of the Dragon Lords could be useful since most of the deck is level 7 dragons. On the same point, Monster Reborn can be used in conjunction with Dragon Shrine to get monsters on board for materials or battle damage. And then, Wavering Eyes can be used to set up the extra deck for a Pendulum summon and deal some damage, despite the fact that it has been neutered somewhat by Master Rule 4. You can then also use the spicy tech of Pendulum Impenetrable, a quick play that protects your Pendulum Zone cards from being destroyed, and is a good counter to cards like Twin Twisters. Finally, you will also use Foolish Burial as a way to send Darkworm to the graveyard, although it could be considered overkill when coupled with Dragon Shrine. Two more links are the standard ones in Brolode and Saryuja, although in my testing I didn't find much use for them. You can also use Gaia Dragon the Thunder Charger to punch through those defense mode monsters, and Galaxy Tomahawk can be used if you want to put together a more link focused extra deck. Additionally, Draco Sack can be used as a way to stall on turn 1 if you find yourself in a pinch, but can also be used to pop some stuff on your opponent's field. Finally, if you wish to go for it and create a more turbo version, you can add in a couple of copies of a Zhanche Magician to go for Odd Eye's Raging Dragon, which, when summoned using Xyz monster as Xyz material, like say Absolute Dragon targeted with Zhangxi, it gains some incredible effects. Attacking twice and destroying all your opponent's cards and gaining 200 attack for each by a simple detachment? It definitely needs to have a deck built around it, but by god, the sheer OTK potential in this card is insane. You should consider it. And that's it. Now that we've covered everything, we can move on to the last part of the video, the replays, where we have a look at how the deck works and how it interacts with other decks and situations. So as always, take it away, me. Thank you, me. As you can see here, guys, we've got just the 2 replays this time. I did actually have 4 lined up, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, they corrupted. So we've only got the 2, but both of these show off how Odd Eyes play quite well, in my opinion. So let's jump into the first one here, and we'll see what it does. So we're going up against Black Wings. Unfortunately, yeah, for whatever reason, they only decided to do that. Don't know why. But here we see, basically, the play style of it. So, Odd Eye's Revolution searching out a combo piece. We know, you know, they got 3 cards in hand, so there's a possibility of interruption. Fortunately, there's none, because he bricked like nothing. But what this will do is it'll let us show off what the deck is capable of. So, summoning the Darkworm, searching the Sprinking Cake 0. Chronograph is then able to summon Time Gazer Magicians, really good. Go to Electromite, you know, put the Phantom into the scale, into the extra deck, because we've already got the Chronograph Sorcerer in there. So we don't need to dump an additional one in there, because we're just going to get the one that we already used back into our hand. So as I said earlier in the video, summon Chronograph and summon another one, so it gets us 2 level 6 spellcasters on board. We top deck into another Revolution Dragon, which is why you run 3, because you want to see it as often as possible, because that lets us search out the Arc Pendulum. Set that in 0 in scale. Let's go for a Pendulum summon. So summon out all those, go into the Absolute Dragon, and then into Decode. Again, this could be Zephyr Metaltron, if you wanted it to be. That's up to you. And then, you know, Absolute goes to the grave so we can activate its effect. Summons out the Vortex Dragon. And because of the Vortex Dragon effect, we can bounce a card. And then we get Naruto, the Moral Leader, on as well. So that's about as good as you'll get for a turn 1, so to speak, especially since Astrograph has been banned. So you got a Spell Trap negation, a pretty much catch-all negation by shuffling, you know, one of these guys in. You'll usually have about 2 or 3 in the extra deck. And then also, if worse comes to worse, targeted, you can use Decode Talker as a tribute, to tribute something. So let's hop over to the second replay now. And this shows off, again, it shows off similar stuff from the deck itself, like similar combo pieces and whatnot. But what it does is it shows you the power of Odd-Eye's Meteor Burst Dragon. So, you know, Search Revolution, use a scale, Duelist Alliance, again, coming in, doing the search that we need to do. And then again, the Chronograph Sorcerer, special summoning Time Gaze, which is really good. Odd-Eye, you know, the Performance Power Odd-Eye's Synchron, into Electromite, being able to pop, search, all that good stuff. And here we do summon both, and the reason for this is because now we can get off the double summon before we need to. So we can add another Odd-Eye's Revolution, so we can search to add Persona, just a bit of deck thinning just in case. And then here, even before we've done our Pendulum summon, we're able to summon out the Vortex Dragon. We then use Odd-Eye's Synchron's effect to summon Persona Dragon, because again, you won't often be using this effect, but the reason I used it here is because he did have a card in hand, so I didn't want to, when it came to battle, I didn't want to worry about, like, you know, hand traps or anything like that. And fortunately, there was a good reason why, because Menko does completely stall your plays, aside from, you know, attacking with Decode Talker, because Decode Talker is a link monster and can't be switched to defense mode. But we summon out the Meteor Burst Dragon, so if we wanted to here, we could have summoned Arc Pendulum onto the field and gone from there. But we decided to leave it as is. But yeah, that turn, that just shows you the power of an Odd-Eye's deck, because right there we went through all the different summoning styles, all the different combo pieces and stuff you can play. And again, unfortunately, I don't have any more replays to share with you guys because it's they corrupted, and I just don't have time, unfortunately, to record. To do another few games and, you know, record some of the extra ones. So unfortunately that's going to be it. But you can see how the deck plays. Obviously, you know, when you run into interruptions, stuff like that, it can stall you quite a bit. But when things are going well and going uninterrupted, which comes up a surprising amount, this is the sort of boards you'll be ending with. So I hope you enjoy, guys, and I'll hand you back to myself and we'll wrap this video up. And that'll bring this video to an end, guys. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, please remember to leave a like, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Comment down below if you feel like I've missed anything, because there's always a chance, and it always happens, that I have missed something. And again, I apologize for the lack of replays in this video. I did aim to have more, but as I said just before, some of them corrupted, so I'll make sure for the next video that that doesn't happen. Here's a deck profile, deck list, if you want to you know, go off of that and go from there. You'll see in the side deck I've got all the different tech options and whatnot. So yeah, my university semester is wrapping up at the time of this video being released. So hopefully I can really sink my teeth into the next couple of archetypes, and we'll enjoy some good videos. So, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, guys. And until next time, this has been the Sage as always, signing out.